Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start my PowerPoint in a minute, and good to see all of you. And by the way, I have now added to my signature, I've now added the address to go into my my channel, my YouTube channel. So if anyone's interested, it's now there. My son suggested that I do that. So your faces will all be there. You can look for yourselves later. Okay, so now I have to share the screen. Okay. So, so first of all, I don't know if any of you get Lilith magazine, but I've been a subscriber for years and years. It began in 1976. This is the premiere issue, which I may have someplace. I love these little blocks here, Lilith in Hebrew. And I guess I usually spell it with two L's, but I guess it's spelled with one L. Anyway, this was the premiere issue. And notice, notice how it's really very interesting picture that you have here. She looks a little bit like Mary Poppins, doesn't she? Anyway, I guess this is like supposed to be multitasking. I'm not quite sure what they're suggesting here, but anyway, and here's another picture of Lilith, and this is the a picture that appears in. Wait, I'll make it a little bit bigger. A picture that appears in something called "Escaping Eden: Finding Lilith in Queerness." Okay. And today, queerness does not necessarily mean, LGBT and whatever other initials there are. But this is very interesting. So this is an image by Sarah Sarwar that she put together. And we'll see this image later because this is actually an image that she's stealing from elsewhere. So she's put together a couple of things here. Anyway, the story of Lilith actually originated in the ancient Near East. And if you think about it, Lilith is like the word Lila, or darkness, right? Evening. So the word Lilith, right, sounds like nighttime. And so this spirit in the Sumerian myth was the dark maid. And in an inscription that was found many years ago in the 7th century, there was actually an inscription which is, "Oh, flyer in a dark chamber, go away at once, oh Lily," right? And then later on, Lilith somehow or another came into the Israelite tradition. She's actually mentioned one place in Isaiah, and they're associated with a goat demon. Also, some people think she might be associated with a night owl, and other people consider her to be a reference to the demon, right? And there are actually magical bowls, which we'll see a picture of later, which actually chase away the evil Lilith, who is, there were magical bowls in the medieval times, in the Talmudic times. So in the Talmud, Lilith not only is a spirit of darkness, but she's also a figure of uncontrolled sexuality. And in the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat 151a, it says, "It is forbidden for a man to sleep alone in a house, lest Lilith get hold of him. Lilith is said to fertilize herself with male sperm to give birth to other demons." Okay. I got all of this information from Jill Hammer, whose Midrash we'll also get to look at later. I don't know if we'll have time to read it in its entirety, but anyway, this article appears on My Jewish Learning, Lilith, Lady Flying in Darkness. Last week we looked at one of her Midrashim. So how does the story all come about, or what's the origin of this story? Why even create a Lilith, all right? So if you remember, there are two versions of the creation of man and woman, right? So the first one is in chapter 1, which is Nasa Adam b'tzalmenu kizmutenu. Let's make a human in our image. Here, Adam means clearly a human being, not necessarily Adam, right? And then it says, "Vayivra Elohim es Adam b'tzalmo b'tzelem Elohim bara oto zachar unkeva bara oto." God created the human in His image, right? It says again Adam, but here Adam again means human. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Okay, so in other words, that's chapter 1, which is that humans are consist of two parts, and both male and female are created in the image of God. Okay, but in chapter 2, we have another creation story, and in this one, you have God fashioned the human, and here the human is a male human, and he fashioned him from the dirt, right, from the soil, and then later on, God looks around and it's not good for him to be alone. For the human, again here, Adam is here a man. Let me make him in Hebrew, Ezer Kenegno, a person, a helpmeet, someone, a sustainer, someone who will be opposite him, all right? And he puts him to sleep and creates the woman from his flesh, right? And this one shall be called woman, Isha, ki meish lukacha zot. For this, from man was this one taken. So here you have two creatures created separately. First the man, and then the woman who the man gives birth to, so to speak, all right, which is interesting in itself because we all know that women give birth to people, not the opposite, but for some reason, this is the second story. And so you have here, and then they cling to one another and they become one flesh. In other words, when they cling together and become one flesh, then they're all going back to the first version, right? Because we were, both of us, created in the image of God. But so you have two complete, different stories. And of course, the question is why, right? So in the alphabet of Ben Sira, which is a document or a tale which appears in something called Toldot Ben Sira. The Toldot is the story of Ben Sira. There's in I guess you would call it chapter 78. There's a description of Lilith, and the description of Lilith is as follows: when God created the first man Adam alone, in other words, this is a reference to the second creation story, and he said it's not good for man to be alone. All right, he created a woman for him from the earth like him. So the first woman was created from the earth like him, and he called her Lilith. All right, but what happened? Adam and Lilith began to argue with him, and she said, "I will not lie below," and he said, "I will not below, but above, since you are fitting for being below, and I am for being above." And she said to him, "Well, two of us are equal, since we are both from the earth." And they would not listen to each other, and they kept on screaming and yelling at each other. And finally, she runs away from him. She can't stand him anymore. And Adam complains to God, "The woman you gave me fled from me." And then what happens is the Holy One, blessed He, immediately dispatches 3 angels. We'll see afterwards these angels appearing on tablets, Sanoi, Sansonoi, and Samalgiloth, to bring her back. And God said to them, if she wants to return, well and good. And if she does not want to return, 100 of her children will die every day. And what happened? They pursued her, but she refused to return. They told her they would drown her in the sea. And she said, "Leave me alone." And anyway, in the end, what happened is they pleaded with her to come back, and she swore to them that she never would come back. All right. And however, she said to them that if she was not very happy about the idea that she would be giving birth to children and she'd watch them die every day. This was horrifying to her. So she swore to them in the name of the living God that whenever she would see them or their names or their images of the three angels, right, she would not overpower that baby. And she accepted that 100 of her children would die every day. In other words, she had no choice. Her children would die every day, little demons. However, if you write an amulet with the names of the three angels, she will remember her oath and the child is protected. So you have this whole legend about Lilith, which comes into our tradition. And so you have here a whole bunch of things around Lilith. So here you have Lilith outside the garden, right? Outside, wounded outside the garden. It's very isn't that an interesting picture? Here's Lilith outside the garden, and inside the garden you can see, you can see pictures of Adam and Eve, right? So, and all the animals, but she is outside the garden, doomed for her destiny. Notice there are lots of snake-like, not snake-like, actual snakes with her, right? Phallic symbols. Maybe these are the little demons who are dying. Hard to tell what it is, but anyway, here's another picture of Lilith with a snake around her. And in 1976, going back to the creation of the first magazine, Aviva Kanzer-Zukov, who was one of the editors or one of the founders of Lilith, had what she called the Lilith question to explain, why they chose that particular name for their feminist Jewish magazine. So she gives the description about Lilith, all right? And she refers to the alphabet of Ben Sira, which she just looked at. And then she writes, the demonic Lilith in the tradition, all right? The demonic Lilith, I'm reading the last words, overshadowed the original independent Lilith in all subsequent legends, to the point where the name Lilith engendered only, I should actually underline the word, only the association of demon witch. It is this demonic image which has both reflected and shaped men's thoughts and feelings about women for generations. However, what they did not pay attention to in the tradition was her desire to be Adam's equal. We're both created from the earth. Okay, so this is the premise of everything about Lilith. And so you have here, if any of you are interested, we don't have time for this also, but if any of you, I could put this into the chat. If any of you would like to watch this, put it in the chat, not now, of course, but how do I put this into the chat? I'll do that. Remind me to do that later, or you can just copy it yourself if you have a screen. And you have a very interesting description of this. And I took a lot of the pictures from this particular YouTube that I have here. So here you have, this is one of the pictures I took from that YouTube. Here you have Lilith. Notice, here's Adam and Eve, and here's Lilith approaching Eve, wanting to have a conversation with her. Adam is turning his back on her, and here she is clearly an inferior looking creature. She has a tail, right? Webbed feet, very, very hairy. Here is a picture of the three angels, Sanoi, Sansanaf, and Samandalof. I don't know how to pronounce them. Anyway, these are the three, and these will appear on amulets, which will protect the people in the future. Here you have the three angels who are coming to bring Lilith back to Adam. Again, we saw before the meaning of Lilith, which also all words of night creature, night monster, night hag, right? So she's always associated with negative things, right? She's also sexually wanton, and she even, not only does she kill babies, but she also steals babies, right? And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, her name appears in a list of monsters, right? As I mentioned earlier, there are magical inscriptions on bowls and amulets. from the 6th century onward, which identify her as a demon and a female demon, and provide the first visual. All right, so here you could see is an example of a bowl with a Jewish Babylonian Aramaic inscription. You can find this in the website of the Jewish National Library, the National Library of Israel. And if you see in the middle, you see here in the middle, right? You see this picture here in the middle, which would be a picture of Lilith. And you have all of these verses, right? All of these verses, people are equipped to write in a bowl. And this is an incantation bowl. And if any of you read Maggie Anton, I think it's Maggie Anton's book, I think it was called The Enchantress. She has a lot of stuff about medieval wives of rabbis who are studying to be enchantresses. Is that the word? I'm not sure if that's the word. But anyway, so you have here, and here you have a actual thing. It says here, Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, Haran Lilith, right? Oh no, not Haran, Chutz. Chutz means go away, run away, get away, right? Shoo, right? Shoo. Adam and Eve, Shoo, Lilith, and here you have the three, Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Samueleth, and you have in the middle here you have God's names, Yud Hey, Vav Hey, right? Yud, right? Or and not in that order, but different versions of it. Here you have the Vav and the Hey, and here you have the Vav and the Dalet. So you have here different words, and here their names are on this again. And so this is in a Kabbalistic. No, it's not in the Kabbalistic. It's in a. It is in the Kabbalistic book. Sorry, Sefer Raziel, which was in the 18th century, early 18th century, 1701. It's an amulet to protect the mother and child against attacks by Lilith during childbirth. So they would put, it reminds me a little bit of, was that Snow White or not Snow White? Who was it who had the little witches around her? The witches sort of put her to Sleeping Beauty, right? Sleeping Beauty, the witch, she plucks her finger and so this is the sort of thing that we know from fairy tales, but these are our own fairy tales in our own tradition. Here's another amulet, again, for a boy, Lizachar, for a boy. This is a special amulet for a boy, Lizachar, and it says Adam v'Chava chutz Lilith, all right, Adam and Eve chasing Lilith away. Again, the names of the three angels, and then you have here other names, Shmar Riel, Chasar Iel, God should shmor to save her or guard her, Chaser Liel, chase away, and then you have here names of God, again, all over again. And so this is a special amulet for a boy, right? Notice a yeshiva boy, notice how he's dressed, right? This is a special amulet for a boy. I don't have a picture of an amulet for a girl, but here's another amulet, right? This is a very detailed amulet. And here it says, again, the three angels, and here it says kara, to tear up, and here it says Satan, tear up the devil, all right? To tear up the devil. Here's another one, right? And there are lots and lots of them, all right? Lots and lots of them. And look at the decorations. Look how elaborate they are, right? And there are a lot of fertility symbols around them. And in here is, right? In here is the birth bed, right? It's probably the midwife protecting, and this is supposed to protect the baby. Fascinating. Here's another one, another picture. This would be a picture of perhaps the men who are waiting outside to hear about the birth, right? I'm just guessing, I don't really know. But anyway, it's fascinating, the details of it. So, and then there are verses around here, all around here. And here's another one. Look at the details here. As the baby is being taken out of the It's interesting. It's just to say, on the one hand, it looks like a natural birth. On the other hand, it looks like a cesarean. If you think about where it's coming from. But anyway, or maybe it's a breech. Maybe it's a breech birth. I'm not sure, but whatever. But you have noticed the devils on the side here. And so this is a danger that a woman can have. And here you have Adam clutching a child in the presence of child snatcher. It's just fascinating, the imagination. And this is a fresco by Filippino Lippi in the Basilica of Santa Maria Novella in Florence. Did any of you ever see this? Next time you're in Florence, go look. Unbelievable. And here's another illustration. Here's, it's not clear who's who. I guess this is Lilith, and this is Adam and Eve. Or maybe this is Lilith. It's hard to tell because the snake is tempting, presumably, Eve. So maybe Lilith is meanwhile trying to seduce Adam. It's not clear what's the subject of this picture. And here is the picture that we saw earlier in that collage that before. This is Rossetti's picture. And there's a lot to say about him because we're talking about 19th century. Let me just go back to that original collage that we saw here. So you can see that she was using Rossetti's picture in her collage. Let's go back to Rossetti's picture. So here's, what do you see in this picture? This is his image of, he calls it Lady Lilith. What do you see in this picture?
Vanity.
Vanity, yes. Very preoccupied with herself, right? Looking into a mirror. Beautiful woman, right? Notice the orange hair, which is also interesting. Associated sometimes with the devil. And so Rossetti wrote a sonnet entitled Lilith, right? And he wrote that Lady Lilith represents a modern Lilith combing out her abundant golden hair and gazing on herself in the glass with that self-absorption by whose strange fascination such natures draw others within their own circle. Isn't that interesting? Right? This is what Rossetti wrote. And so Lilith also in Jewish folk tradition is associated with long hair, possibly, not dark hair, but light hair or red hair. And because hair has seductive power in Jewish culture, that's why you're supposed to cover it, right? And that you can possess women by entering them through mirrors. So the whole idea, it's interesting how mirrors have changed here, because if you remember, there's that wonderful, we'll look at the what he wrote in a minute, but if you remember that wonderful midrash about the women, remember, any of you remember that particular midrash about women in, when the men in, during slavery in Egypt, when they didn't want to procreate, they got mirrors and beautified themselves so that they would tempt their husbands to sleep with them so that they could have children, because the husbands did not want to sleep with them. Why? Because there was a verdict to kill all the babies, right? So, and these mirrors they took with them and actually used these mirrors in the building of the tabernacle, because they had those mirrors. So the mirrors, all of a sudden now mirrors have magical power. And it's very interesting. There is a folk tradition of that. And this is a poem that he wrote. It's nothing special. It's a little, we're talking about that romantic period, right? Of Adam's first wife, Lilith, it is told, the witch he loved before the gift of Eve, but ere the snakes her sweet tongue could deceive, and her enchanted hair was the first gold. And still she sits young while the earth is old, and subtly of herself contemplative, draws men to watch the bright web she can weave, till heart and body and life are in its hold. The rose and poppy are her flower, for where is he? Not found, O Lilith, whom she sent. whom shed scent, whom shed scent, and soft shed kisses and soft sleep shall snare. Lo, as that youth's eyes burned at thine, so went thy spell through him, and left his straight neck bent, and round his heart one strangling golden hair. Very, very romantic. This is Rossetti. And now we can look at the picture again through the eyes of that poem. All right. This is his version of Lilith. And obviously it's a picture of someone he knew. Okay. And here are two more modern pictures of Lilith. This is Pamela Feldman. If you remember, Marla Feldman spoke to us last year. She has her book of Midrashim, and this is her twin sister who has these two pictures on her website of Lilith. One of Eve, this is the submissive wife, and the other of Lilith, who's Frida. Okay. So Judith Glasgow, very interesting story, Judith Glasgow, who basically wrote a Midrash that's been printed over and over again, although it wasn't so easy for me to actually find it, but I finally did find it. She actually wrote this Midrash, it just came pouring out of her. And she wrote this at the behest of a women's group for a conference where does she talk about it? She actually talks about it on her website. Let me just see if I have the information here. No, I'll come to this afterwards. Wait, don't read that. That spoiler. Okay, anyway, so this is how she wrote it. She really wrote it, and she did it like without too much thought, but it became, in those days, they didn't have the internet or whatever, but it became viral, right? It was all over the place, reproduced, everyone referred to it. It's one of the very, very first midrashim that came out. Okay, so let's have some readers. Louise, you start, then Toby, then Jill. How many readers do we need? What, 5, 6 readers. So what did I say? Louise, 1, Toby, 2, Jill, 3, Barbara, 4, Geraldine, 5. How many did I say we needed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, I think. 6. And so Susan, 6. Okay. So,
okay. In the beginning, the Lord God formed Adam and Lilith from the dust of the ground and breathed into their nostrils the breath of life. Created from the same source, both having been formed from the ground, they were equal in all ways. Adam, being a man, didn't like this situation, and he looked for ways to change it. He said, "I'll have my figs now, Lilith," ordering her to wait on him, and he tried to leave to her the daily tasks of life in the garden.
But Lilith wasn't one to take any nonsense. She picked herself up, uttered God's holy name, and flew away. "Well now, Lord," complained Adam, "that uppity woman you sent me has gone and deserted me." The Lord, inclined to be sympathetic, sent his messengers after Lilith, telling her to shape up and return to Adam or face dire punishment. She, however, preferring anything to living with Adam, decided to stay where she was. And so God, after more careful consideration this time, caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and out of one of his ribs created for him a second companion, Eve.
For a time, even Adam had a good thing going. Adam was happy now. Eve, though she occasionally sensed capacities within herself that remained undeveloped, was basically satisfied with the role of Adam's wife and helper. The only thing that really disturbed her was the excluding closeness of the relationship between Adam and God. Adam and God just seemed to have more in common, both being men, and Adam came to identify with God more and more. After a while, that made God a bit uncomfortable too, and he started going over in his mind whether he may not have made a mistake letting Adam talk to him into banishing Lilith and creating Eve, seeing the power that gave that gave Adam.
Meanwhile, Lilith, all alone, attempted from time to time to rejoin the human community in the garden. After her first fruitless attempt to breach its walls, Adam worked hard to build them stronger, even getting Eve to help him. He told her fearsome stories of the demon Lilith, who threatens women in childbirth and steals children from their cradles in the middle of the night. The second time Lilith came, she stormed the garden's main gate, and a great battle ensued between her and Adam, in which she was finally defeated. This time, however, before Lilith got away, Eve got a glimpse of her and saw she was a woman like herself.
Five. Who's five?
Lynn, I think.
Okay, I don't know who's five is. Susan, you want to read five?
Yeah. After this encounter, seeds of curiosity and doubt began to grow in Eve's mind. Was Lilith indeed just another woman? Adam had said she was a demon. Another woman. The very idea attracted Eve. She had never seen another creature like herself before. And how beautiful and strong Lilith looked, how bravely she had fought. Slowly, slowly, Eve began to think about the limits of her own life within the garden.
Norman, you want to read I don't know.
I was supposed to be 6, but go ahead, Norman.
Go ahead. Okay, one day, after many months of strange and disturbing thoughts, Eve, wandering around the edge of the garden, noticed a young apple tree she and Adam had planted, and saw that one of its branches stretched over the garden wall. Spontaneously, she tried to climb it and, struggling to the top, swung herself over the wall. She didn't wander long on the other side before she met the one she had come to find, for Lilith was waiting. At first sight of her, Eve remembered the tales of Adam and was frightened, but Lilith understood and greeted her kindly. "Who are you?" they asked each other. "What is your story?" And they sat and spoke together of the past and then of the future. They talked for many hours, not once, but many times. They taught each other many things, and told each other stories, and laughed together, and cried over and over, till the bond of sisterhood grew between them.
Okay. So what are your thoughts? Let's anyway look at this interesting picture here of Lilith and Eve before we just talk about what she had to say here. Right? Isn't this a beautiful? It goes so beautifully with what we just read now. Okay, so here's Lilith is like sort of like with an angel and the tail. She has wings, but she has a tail because she flies. And here is Eve. Maybe Eve about to give birth. We don't really know why Eve is lying like that. But anyway, it's interesting. Anyway, what are your thoughts about this midrash as you read it? Did anything strike your,
It's like the wonder of discovery of somebody that looks like you and you've never seen before. And gee, maybe I'm not the only one, and there she is,
Okay. It's a very strong friendship, right? It's like an attraction, two people meeting, or an attraction which she does not have necessarily with Adam, right? Because Adam is always trying to control her. Even God, that's what struck me in this particular story. Even God thought he made a mistake, right? This creation is going even a little bit too far for him, right? A little bit too far in pushing his man. Anyway, when I read this, I had I don't remember when I read it. This is, I think, the third time that I'm teaching it. Some of you have been on this before. Norman, I know you might have been here. This might be the third time for you. I don't know.
Maybe.
But maybe. But the rest of you, I don't know how many times you've been here for this particular one. However, what's really very interesting is, as I was reading it, I thought about Judith Plasko, who I know very well. I know her, first of all, she was a good friend of my sister's. And so when I met her, you know, it was like the very first time I met her at a conference, we immediately clicked because it's like, you know, it was sort of like family. Anyway, when I read her book years and years ago, I really leaned on it very heavily for some of my early writings. Her book, Standing Against at Sinai, very important book. And you know, she came out at the end of the book, you know, mentioning that she was a lesbian, which I think was very well known to everyone at that point, but maybe not to everyone. And then I had to sort of re-look at the book all over again from that particular vantage point. Anyway, I had been in touch with her before. I had even invited her to participate in the class, and so I wrote to her, of course, like, you know, inviting her to speak, but she never was able to make it. Both times, this time I didn't even bother to invite her, but anyway, so this was my correspondence with her. I wrote to her. This was in 2020. So this is when I first taught this. I think it was Norman, you would have been there probably. It was when I was teaching the Nahariya group. We had a fabulous session. It was totally unscripted. After presenting a lot of material and art on Lilith, alphabet, Ben Sira, rabbinic stuff, etc., someone else read your Midrash. While she was reading it, I noticed for the first time the theme of sexual attraction between women. Had you popped in, I would have asked you, was your attraction to women conscious at that time or subconscious? At any rate, the discussion was far-ranging and went on for about 30 hours, 30 minutes, not time, not hours. We talked about the history of feminism. I'm always shocked at how my generation does not know that much. I expected of the younger generation. You would have loved the discussion. I'm sorry that I didn't record it today. I'm recording it. But I plan to do this again when I finish this round. And it was such a great experience discussing someone else's midrash. I think it was Joyce who had asked me to do this whole thing. And so I did it for her in that group as opposed to mine, and speculating on what was behind it. I must admit that they were all moved by the story, especially in contrast to the traditional take on Lilith. By the way, I started out by mentioning how important your work was to me when you were printing them in Tikkun before your book. Have a good Thanksgiving holiday. Okay, so this I wrote to her in 2020. And this is what she wrote on the top. That sounds great. I'm so sorry I missed it. The attraction between Eve and Lilith was unconscious. I didn't notice it until some years after I wrote the story, when I heard someone reading it aloud, and I was totally startled. I talk about this in Lilith Revisited. I don't really have that article, an essay that is included in The Coming of Lilith. Sorry, I don't have an online copy I can attach. Thanks so much for being in touch, okay? So this is really very, very interesting. And so I thought this might interest some of you because at the time, I don't think she was even herself. I don't think she had come out at the time. She had been married before that to a conservative rabbi, Robert Goldenberg, I think. That was his name, Bob Goldenberg, who actually was a very good friend of my sister's. And I don't know if I ever met him. And I think they had one child between them. And then he subsequently remarried, and she has a partner. I'm not sure. She's been with the same person for many years. I think very prominent historian. I just forget her name right now. Okay. Any comments? Anyone want to share something? Do any of you know of her writings, by the way? If you don't know her book, you really should get a hold of it. It basically is, there are some easier entries into it, but the book is very well written, and it's, you know, she's a theologian, a serious theologian, and the book is a very important book to just bring you into Jewish theology. Okay, let me go back to sharing. Okay, so here's a few more pictures. This is Faust and Lilith. Why Faust?
Why?
Oh, a bargain, you know, a bargain with the devil. So this time the devil is Lilith, not, you know, right? And look at the background here. Right? See the background? All the dancing, leading him away. He makes a bargain with the devil. I assume you know the story. Here's Lilith and the 7 deadly sins. She gets blamed for a lot. And here is Lilith, the Jewish vampire who rules over birth and death. In this painting, she attends the deathbed of a sinful man, the 6th palace of hell by Faye Pomerantz. Okay. Isn't that amazing? Look at that. Look at that.
I was almost going to say she lost her tail over time, but now I see in the dark section she still has those animalistic physical features.
Wonder who Faye Pomerantz is. I know Faye. I don't think there. I know Pomerantz. No, but it's not Faye. It's not the same thing. That's Pomerantz. Okay, so now we come. Now we come to Jill Hammer's Midrash, Sisters at Sinai, which is called Havdalah. What is Havdalah?
Separation.
Separation.
Separation. Separation between night and day, between Shabbat and the regular days of the week, between us and the rest of the nations. Something which I'd like not to, when we sing that, I try not to say that, because I think that's problematic. And then you also have giving birth. When you separate yourself from, you've been carrying this kid inside of you for 9 months, and all of a sudden the baby comes out and you're now separated from the baby. So you also have giving birth as a form of, okay, so now how many readers do we need here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 8 readers. What's this? Yeah, we need 8 readers. So now I'm asking all of you to pay close attention to your numbers. 8 readers. Louise, wait, let me start from the beginning here. Norman, 1. Barbara, 2. Susan, 3. Stevie, are you there?
Yeah.
4. Louise, 5. Toby, 6. Jill, 7. Jerry Lynn, 8. Okay? Write them down so you don't forget. Okay.
Don't go into the woods, Adam insisted. There are dangerous things there. Like the trees at the center of the garden? Eve asked angrily. I listened to you too much. This time I want to find out for myself. With Adam's voice pursuing her, Eve ran off into the woods. At first, Eve ran in blackness, but soon she was able to see dim outlines by the light of the rents in the sky. The woods were strange in the darkness, but they smelled familiar. Eve forged ahead, brushing aside vines and rose briars. A pair of foxes moved out of her way. She passed a panda in its bamboo patch, munching on twigs. From time to time, the rhythmic thumping became louder, fuller, luring her forward. It began to echo her footfalls as if it were her shadow moving ahead of her. Eve was feeling her way through a fern grove when the feathery plants were suddenly brilliantly lit. Eve thought day had returned. Then she realized that the light was a strange color. Looking up, Eve saw a huge blue-white disk in the sky. She was afraid of it and put her hands up to her eyes. It's the moon, said a voice beside her. Eve looked next to her in consternation. Another Eve stood there. Where Eve had parchment-pale skin and dark hair, this new Eve had skin like ink. Her white hair streamed down her black skin like 100 comet tails, squiggling and curving. She had the same triangle of fur at the place where her legs came together, but it was white as milk. The second woman was smiling at Eve and drumming her fingers on a tree at the center of the grove. It was the sound Eve had heard in the clearing. Eve saw why Adam had smiled at the fire. This woman was like the echo of a flame.
Eve felt strange inside. I thought I was the only one of what I was, she said. She did not know where else to begin. Oh, you are, said the second Eve. My name is Lilith. And then Eve remembered the word Adam had called at night when he was dreaming. She knew this woman was a memory Adam had from before she had come to be. I do not want you here, Eve said. Neither does Adam, said Lilith. I have been banished from the garden because I would not obey him and lie beneath him, because I named myself. I've been given this night only to convince you. Then I must leave again forever. Convince me of what? Eve asked suspiciously. Only the voice in Adam ever tried to convince her of things. She didn't want to listen to Lilith. That you too need to leave the garden. Eve shook her head angrily. This is my home. Even if it's dark now, it's still my home. I will not leave. I also have a home, said Lilith. She looked a little sad, less fiery. Eve felt curiosity uncurl within her. Where did one live if one was outside of Eden? Where is your home? She asked. What do you do there? I live in the sea, said Lilith, and give birth to children.
Children? Eve did not know the word. She was getting frustrated by her lack of vocabulary. She needed more words. Like kittens, like fawns, the small who will grow larger. Eve smiled. She had seen young creatures playing in Eden, chicks and lambs. But they are all taken from me, Lilith said, and now her voice had an angry tone. Each one of them is taken, and the angels have told me I will never see them again, unless, Eve asked, unless you too give birth to children. My children are the souls of yours. Until there are bodies for them, they cannot remain in the world. My sons and daughters need you in order to become free. Eve remembered the elephant squeezing out her calf by the river. I do not want children, she insisted. There can be nothing new without children, Lilith said. Without the young, there will be no one to inherit your memories. Eve thought of the small bear cubs playing in the hills. Even if I did want children, she said defensively, I don't know how to have them.
I know, Lilith said, and in order to learn, you will have to eat from the tree of the center of the garden, not the tree of life, which is the tree from which I have eaten, but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then time will begin, and you will know what to do. But if I eat from the tree, I will die. You are trying to kill me so that you have Adam back. Eve started away from the woman beside her. She wanted to break into the woods and find Adam again. Keep him away from this other woman who disobeyed the voice. Lilith grabbed Eve's wrist in her dark fist. It is true that if you eat from the tree, you will someday die, she said. But it is also true that if you do not eat the fruit, you will never truly live. I do not understand, Eve said, trying to break away. I know, said Lilith. That's why I came here. Lilith walked away from Eve to the center of the glade, crouched and drew a circle in the soil. Around the circle, she placed stones. Then she began to rub two sticks together. You are making fire, Eve exclaimed, slowly drawing closer. So Adam had learned to start fires from Lilith.
Yes, said Lilith. The sparks that flew from Lilith's sticks caught and flamed upward. The fire became a towering pillar, a shape with branches and leaves. The tree burned, but it was not consumed by the fire. Lilith kindled another flame, and a second pillar formed beside the first, a darker column flickering. Smoke bit at Eve's eyes. She recognized the shapes. Lilith was showing her the trees at the center of the garden, the trees the voice had told them not to touch. Watch, Lilith commanded. Eve crouched and watched. The fruits of the two fiery trees began to swell, larger and larger, until their taut roundness rivaled the moon. Then they burst like seed pods into the night. Sparks scattered everywhere, glowed in every part of the sky, then disappeared. Eve gasped at their unbearable, momentary beauty. She had never before seen anything that reached so deeply into her heart. That is what we are meant to do, said Lilith to Eve. We are meant to scatter our sparks in the world. Without that task, we are not alive. And so you must begin death, and hope children. You must bear bodies for the souls that are waiting. You must begin the story, Eve.
And disobedience, said Eve quietly after a long moment. I must begin that as well. I have begun that for you, said Lilith. When I have picked the fruit, will the voice be silent? Asked Eve. Lilith smiled, her dark eyes glowing with the firelight. You may find that even in rebellion, you are following the sound of the voice. There was a rushing of storks' wings. Angels came flying in shimmering bunches toward the fern glade. Gathering around Lilith, they lifted her up into the air. Eve grabbed Lilith's hands and tried to hold her. The angels persisted. Eve was forced to let go as Lilith rose farther and farther from the ground. Lilith waved with an ink-colored hand. Then she spread two immense silver wings and flew away, singing in Eve's voice. Eve turned and made her way back to the clearing by the sea. Soon there was a reddish glow through a strand of pines. Eve followed it and stepped into the ring of light. Adam was still engaged in a tug-of-war with the angels, who had grown bigger and brighter and more numerous during the struggle. As Eve watched, the angels pried the book from Adam's fingers and leaped off with it into the forest.
Adam breathed heavily and sagged into Eve's arms, where he lay quietly for a minute. It doesn't matter, he said to Eve. I read it first. What did you learn? Eve asked. She settled by the circle of the stones, folding her legs beneath her. The way to the future, Adam answered slowly. His eyes shifted toward her. Did you find anything in the forest? Eve wanted to tell him about Lilith, but somehow she was not ready. She knew it was the first separation between them. I saw a night owl hatching their eggs, she said. Adam handed Eve a roasted apple as a gift. She bit into it hungrily. It was wrinkled and liquid from the fire. Then she arranged a bed of soft leaves and petals. The embers of the fire dimmed as the two humans lay down to sleep. The darkness was no longer frightening. Instead, it rested as a kind of cloak over their dreams.
Enid Dom, in her poem Lilith.
Wait, one second. Read this, but that was the end of the story. I must have edited it because some of the things are not clear. But read this. This is Geraldine. This is a commentary.
Enid Dom, in her poem Lilith, imagines Lilith as an eternal bohemian who leaves Eden, drops in and out of men's sexual fantasies in the Middle Ages, and now lives with a cab driver in New Jersey, where she still cries in the bathroom as she remembers Eden and the man and the God I couldn't live with. And Lynn Gottlieb's story of Lilith is made from the sky and Adam from the earth. In her love from Adam, Lilith chooses to forget she came from the sky, and she becomes Eve, settled and happy, but ignorant of her own true nature. In her story, I don't know how to pronounce that word, is it?
Gottlieb.
Oh, Gottlieb dramatizes the
That's
struggle.
the name of the author, Gottlieb.
Gottlieb dramatizes the struggle of women to love men while still loving themselves. On the other hand, Jacqueline Lapidus' brief poem, Eden, imagines a lesbian encounter between Lilith and Eve. Using the Lilith legend, Lapidus invents an origin story for love between women. Oh gosh. Scholar and author Ohed Ezraki frequently writes about Lilith as a split-off sexual component of women, an image created by men fearful of a full relationship. He encourages men and women to see Lilith and Eve as the same person.
Okay, so these are some other people who wrote about it. But what struck you? And then Jill has her notes. You could find her notes are really very interesting, and you might want to read the book in its entirety. You could probably find it online. But what struck you about, I had, as you were reading, I underlined some things here. You might have noticed that I was underlining them. Did anything strike you as you were reading this particular midrash? First of all, I think it's very interesting that we have the binary here of white and black, by the way. The fact that, Geraldine, I don't know what you thought about it, the fact that Lilith is a black woman here, right? She's dark, her skin is dark, and Eve is white. I don't know, how that struck you, what your feelings were about that. On the other hand, becomes, right? Lilith becomes the person with power, and not in these renditions, with power and encouragement to Eve to take steps out. She's like a strong person. So in the modern renditions of her, she's full of strength, and Eve is sort of like a namby-pamby person who has no initiative on her own. So Geraldine, do you have any thoughts about this? I'm just curious, and then other people as well. You're muted.
I'll be not really.
No, okay. Good.
I mean, I just kind of briefly went through a whole bunch of stuff in my head, but not really. I mean, not really.
Okay. All right. I was just curious.
Now I might come back to that at a later time when I give it more thought, but right now, not really.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Anybody else with some thoughts in general about this? The binary between, the women are either or, right? They're either, prostitutes or they're virgins, this type of a thing. They're either sex symbols or they have to be put on, on a pedestal, right? This whole binary type of thing. And so Eve is one and Lilith is the other.
I mean, it's almost like there was no middle road for either one of them. It's like they're two extremes, and one is trying to convince the other one, but and the other one's resisting and doesn't really understand what she's trying to teach her. I mean, it was like, even when she went back to Adam, it seemed like she was still, I don't know, lost, I guess, a little.
Except they lie down together, though, at the end.
I found it very interesting that Lilith gives birth to souls and Eve is expected to give birth to the bodies that will inhabit those. So again, it's a binary. You've got the soul and then you've got the body.
Right. And yet the soul is supposed to be everlasting.
Call you later, okay? I've been teaching. A few minutes, bye.
So yeah, so that makes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I said, but then the soul is supposed to be the everlasting part. Like the body can disintegrate, but the soul is always there.
Right. I thought that what is really interesting here, I'll share it again with you. I thought it was really interesting the fact that Lilith had all these souls floating around.
Right.
Right? Wasn't that fascinating that she had all these? Where was it? Over here? Yeah, my children, unless you too give birth to children, my children are the souls of yours. Right. Until there are bodies for them, they cannot remain in the world. My sons and daughters need you in order to become free. What an amazing idea that is. What is Jill doing with the midrash, with the traditional midrash? What is she doing with them?
Well, I mean, she was told that they would all be killed. She would lose 100 children every day.
Right. So Jill is turning around that horrible midrash, right?
Right.
The demonization of her to say that they're souls and they need bodies. So these hundreds and hundreds, right, of souls, which she has been giving birth to all these years, right?
Right.
Are now waiting for bodies. It's a beautiful idea. By the way, it's very mystical, and it's probably, I don't really know that much about Kabbalah, but it's probably a very Kabbalistic idea. Jill is very into mysticism. I'm sure you probably know that. She's very into mysticism, and we could take a look at some of her notes, but yeah, so right away, here we go. Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist, right, posited at the beginning of creation, there was a great shattering. The vessels into which God had poured the primordial light broke. So in other words, this is the whole idea of the eating of the fruit broke the vessels, right? So you have this whole idea. And she said that Luria, in other words, the Kabbalistic approach, has a deep impact on her theology, right? She sees the world as a place that's broken, that requires the partnership of humans and gods. And with her, she's imagining Eve in the garden as a woman who doesn't know this is her task. And she has Lilith, who sort of represents God, to come into her life here, right? So she really switches everything around, and she creates she creates a situation. Let's see, where is this here? So she took the idea of Lilith's children, and she turned them into souls. By the way, she definitely was influenced by Judith Plasko's story, right? And she definitely knows it and whatever, so she's certainly aware of it. And so she also has written a poem, which I don't have here, which is called Eve and Lilith, where she actually has Eve and Lilith being the same women, all right? They're one, they're whole, and they need to come together. So, and then she says the story Havdalah is based on the legends of the origin of Havdalah, the celebration, of separation of Sabbath between, right? And the whole idea that Adam and Eve are afraid when the first night falls, right, in the garden. So God shows them how to make fire, which makes them happy now that they could. So notice here, instead of God showing them how to make fire, it's Lilith who shows Eve how to make fire. So in a sense, what is, according to this, we could say that Lilith is almost, may I say this, is almost God, right? She's taking on God's role. It's very, very daring on her part. On the other hand, this is the same Jill Hammer who started a school for priestesses. So why not? Yeah, Jill.
The one thing I noticed, and you're talking about of Lilith being God in several of these midrashim, that Lilith is intelligent, where Eve sees very simple and childish. So like that Lilith is definitely the more superior of the two. So that would fall into godlike almost.
And she lives forever, whereas Eve, as soon as she will be eating from the tree, will end up dying. Not immediately, but in other words, she brings death into the world. By the way, the midrashim are very harsh on Lilith for bringing death in the world. I mean, they actually blame her for bringing death in the world. On the other hand, if we didn't have, just imagine if everyone was floating around from the beginning of humanity till now, talk about overpopulation, that would be, there would not be a world. So, okay, anyway, yeah, Sherilyn.
All right, so I'm going to be brave here.
Good.
All right.
Like Lilith.
Yes, okay. I wasn't ready to talk when you asked me. You kind of caught me off surprise, but she kind of reminds me of me in a little way. All right. And that she wants her independence. She doesn't want to be told by a man what to do. She explores sexually. And she's a dangerous person, yet she's very liberal in many of her thinking. It could be viewed as dangerous.
Okay. And she is dangerous, definitely. She's dangerous, certainly to men, but also she's dangerous to mankind because she makes us think, right? She makes us wonder. She makes us ask questions. She makes us challenge. So she is, she is dangerous for sure.
I have a question. To your knowledge, has anyone written an alternative story about what would have happened had Lilith remained the first female human?
That is not to the best of my knowledge. Here, Toby, that's a
You have
midrash.
homework. No, you have homework.
No, you should write it. You should write it, Toby. That's a wonderful idea. And by the way, I don't know if any of you read my blog yet. It just came out, but it's called What If? All right. And so what if, that's a wonderful here. I'm giving you even the first line. What if, okay? And you could say you were inspired by my blog, okay? You could all write, or if Toby doesn't want to, you could all, Sue, if she were here, I would certainly throw it out. But look, you all have midrashim in you, at least one, right? You have to start writing the first one. And then afterwards, who knows what will come pouring out afterwards.
And the other thing is, I just one last thing. I always find it interesting the way, when she's created, and she wants, she says she's equal and she's a strong woman, the way then the men spin it, turning her into a demon and a terrible person, and she does this and that. It's what they do with all the strong women in the Bible.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Right.
Nothing's changed.
But you know what? I'm experiencing that now in this country with a lot of things, because Black women in particular, no matter how intelligent, how whatever, they're always criticized and demonized by, white males.
Right.
And
Carla Hayden, for
look
one.
at what's going on in Congress. She went to do her job.
Right.
And now they got Homeland Security and they want to file all this stuff. Come on, man. No matter what you do, no matter how well educated, okay, let me calm down. No matter how well educated you are,
right,
or your experience, it's like you've always got to prove yourself.
Yeah. And you never seem to be able to. I mean, we were a lot of unhappiness over that one, let me tell you.
And you're seeing it right
in
now.
My world.
Oh, okay, now we're going into politics. So wait, let me just stop let me stop the recording.
All right.
Oh, wait, and then we can continue. Yes.
All right. You start.